So welcome to this PRCA MENA webinar this afternoon, where we are going to be unpacking all kinds of discussion around mental health and wellness in the workplace. If I can ask all the panelists just to stay on mute until we're talking, make sure the line is really clear, that would be great. So to all of you that have joined, who is the PRCA? And a phenomenal organisation that represents over 35,000 PR professionals in 70 countries around the world. So a really large organisation that was founded in 1969 and has been here in MENA since 2016. The organisation is here to support people like you, to support the communication and PR industries. And this year marks the really exciting landmark moment that they launched their very first ever MENA mental health report in partnership with YouGov. Phenomenal report. It's available on the website, so go check it out if you want to look at it while the panelists are talking today. That covers all kinds of information, insight and intelligence around the state of mental health in our industry today. Where are we? How's it going? And of course, in 2020, what impact has that had on our people and the industry? We spoke to just under 2,000 PR and professionals across the MENA region. And this report was really, yes, about provoking conversation and awareness, but definitely about trying to provoke some action. So the role of this panel discussion today is to give you some insight into what that report found, and of course, give you access to all these fantastic panelists who are going to help me delve into some of that information. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to these 5 extremely qualified people. You can find out more about them on all of their websites because they all have phenomenal bios with all of their achievements. But very quickly, to tell you who's here with me today, I'm Nicklin. I'm an author. I've just written the book Softening the Edge, which is all about empathy in the world and how we can drive empathy in the workplace. So that's my passion and what drives me to really talk about wellness and connectivity. We've got Paul Firth, who's the Managing Director of ICAS MENA. He's got over 28 years of corporate health and wellbeing management experience. He founded ICAS MENA back in 2010 and is now supporting over 250,000 lives and 120 clients in over 18 countries as a leading professional in the EAP space here in MENA. So welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've also got Nashwa Tantawy here, who's a psychologist with LifeWorks, which is a holistic counselling centre. She's a psychologist and a mental health influencer and plays a really critical role over at LifeWorks, overseeing all of those services from maternity assistance all the way to employee mental health and seeing clients face to face. So Nashwa, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mimi.
Welcome. Dr. Saliha Afridi is also here. She's a clinical psychologist and the MD over at Lighthouse Arabia, which was something she founded in 2011. Really with a vision to making a positive impact on mental health in this region. She's a generalist with training and experience with a wide range of mental health issues, and her goal, which is just beautiful, is to work with children, adolescents, adults and families to give them the courage to really address challenges and be well and healthy on their path to happiness. So Dr. Saliha, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my honor, thank you.
Dani Hakim is also here from Safe Space. She's one of the co-founders. Safe Space is an organisation that provides mental wellbeing support for corporates and communities. They work with trained professionals and provide initiatives, programmes and resources in a safe and nurturing environment so that people can really learn how to prioritise their mental health. And Dani is probably one of the forefront speakers and opinion leaders around mental health and how we market that, how we rebrand it, I've heard Dani say before, and how we really position mental health as a top priority in the region. So Dani, thank you for being here.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And then last but definitely not least is Dalia Halabi, who's a mental health advisor here in the Middle East. And her previous roles were in some of the world's leading PR and comms firms. Dalia is a people-orientated team player committed to creating an open, trusting environment to achieve positive change. And I know she's just run here from a really busy schedule. So thank you so much for being here with us, Dalia. So to everyone who's now joined, welcome. We're going to be starting now. We're going to go through 5 or 6 questions today. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box. There is a team behind the scenes that are going to help me moderate those questions, and we'll come to them at the end. So either let us know if you have a question for one of the panelists specifically, for me, or for all of us, and we'll probably talk through questions for the next 40 minutes or so, and then we'll open that up to discussion to all of you on the line. So without further ado, I want to talk a little bit about Mental Health Awareness Week, which was last week. We saw the world talking mental health, really elevating that conversation. When I read the PRCA MENA report, which, as I said, you can find on the PRCA website, definitely open it up while we're talking. I was really positive, actually, because what that report shows is that 66% of companies here in MENA now rank positively. That's fair, good, or very good, as ranked by staff in those organizations, at treating mental health problems. And they put that on par with other health issues. So for me, that's a really fantastic moment, right? We've got 66% of companies that are beginning to really rank positively. Of course, there's a lot more to do, and some of the data in that report paints a slightly less positive picture, which we'll come on to. But I'm going to start with you, Dani. How do you think that this year has really impacted organizations' openness to recognizing and supporting emotional wellness in the workplace? And I ask you because, of course, Safe Space has been doing lots of conversations through this time. How do you think the year has changed organizations' openness to this conversation?
I think from our perspective, and again, being quite optimistic, the silver lining of the pandemic is that it's really put mental health on everybody's agenda. I don't know anybody that hasn't felt anxious, stressed, overwhelmed. So regardless of whether you're a CEO or a junior within a company, that's been felt. And I think it's rippled out into the work as well. So I think that's why it is definitely coming through, people reaching out to us and all these amazing other organizations to kind of get that support, because it's maybe not been as straightforward on where to take those first steps. So that's something that we are grateful for, really, from what we've just all been through.
And Paul, do you feel the same? Have you felt sort of positive momentum towards this discussion?
Absolutely. I think I'll probably add to that, you know, in my 10 years here, I have seen a progression and a movement towards mental health being more recognized and accepted here. So I think it's been a gradual, you know, thing that we've seen over a number of years now. What COVID's done, I think, is just really heightened the spike in terms of organizations really seriously now, you know, taking mental health and employee mental well-being as a very much at a top priority. You know, in my 10 years here, this year's been the first year where, you know, we've had corporates actually coming and wanting EAPs as opposed to me going out and selling EAPs. You know, and I think, you know, the change in the dynamics in the workplace, I suppose, have really enforced companies to review, you know, employee well-being and, you know, managing a lot of employees now remotely. So I think they've had to make a change, and, you know, it's been positive for raising the awareness and an understanding of mental health. So it's good.
Paul, just for everyone on the line, EAP stands for?
Sorry, Employee Assistance Program, which is, you know, fairly common in the US, Western Europe. Has now grown here, but still, you know, a development area here, you know, for the Middle East and MENA region.
Fantastic, thank you. And Dr. Saliha, obviously you see people across all areas of their life, personal life, obviously professional, personal has lots of interaction. How do you think the awareness in the corporate world has changed? Have you seen your clients feeling more or less supported by their organizations, particularly in this working from home world? What's your take on that conversation?
Perhaps my take is not as positive. And I speak on behalf of most of the people that are working at the Lighthouse. So I personally don't see families and individuals. My work now primarily is with the corporate sector. And what I've noticed that this is coming not necessarily out of a place of employee well-being, but more of a desperation. We have hit rock bottom, I would say, and there's nowhere to go but to address this. This was not out of, oh, let me just do this out of the goodness of my heart for my employees, but this is, we are losing human capital here. We are losing some of the most, the most important resource within our companies, and that is our people. And these people are suffering, and this is no longer something that we can turn a blind eye towards. We have to address this, and so we must. And so this is the stance that I see, that people are calling the Lighthouse mostly because there's just a lot of crises that they're seeing, and mental health crises that they're seeing, rather than, oh, well, how do we go from good to great? This is more about, how do we now fix this because we didn't address it, or we didn't look at it, or we didn't think about it up until now, and now we have no other choice.
Yeah. And Nashwa, are you also finding that in some of your work? Are you finding, similar to what Dr. Saliha is saying here, that, that we really are at rock bottom, and even though people seem to be saying their organizations are doing better, there still is a really sort of dire need out there for support?
I sort of agree with her that actually myself, I was approached by one of the webinars of a software company. They were asking me to have a quick session for their team because currently they are burnt out because of working very long hours. It's a software house, everyone is working from home, and the work was bubbled. So from one aspect, yes, I have seen now this sort of increased focus on this. Yes, I see it from another perspective. It was not just only about the companies. The percentage has increased on an individual level as well, because people, and actually it's obvious in our research piece here that even with acknowledging that they have all the symptoms, or 85% having lots of symptoms related to stress and depression and anxiety, yet just 8% are acknowledging that they are having a problem and they are trying to address it. So it is both sides, the individual level and the company level. So it's a reflection both. Yes, at the same time, I can see COVID-19 as a blessing just for this aspect. Because maybe this is the right time to start focusing on this. It was the hard way at the beginning, that, oh my God, I have to approach someone to help me out. Yes, I guess there will be a genuine increase that's going to take place afterwards. This understanding of, okay, I need help, I can reach out for it, whether on a company level or individual level, started to spark in all cases, especially that the pain now is universal. Before that, it is sort of a personal thing. I just feel the pain on my own. Now everyone is stressed out, and I have an excuse that there is COVID. So now is the time to talk freely about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. Now is that time. Dalia, you've worked in PR firms for a long time, and big companies, and I'm sure some smaller ones as well. I know, because I've also worked in agencies my entire career, we work longer hours than many other industries. It's very high pressure. We never have a quiet day. What's your take on how people have responded in the industry, and how this might be different for the PR industry? Or do you think this is a raising discussion across the board?
Well, I think from my own experience in PR, like you rightfully said, it is a very stressful environment because there is no 9 to 5. You're literally always on. You're always on call and you're always working. And the agency life by its nature has a lot of ambiguity. You never know where your career path is going. You seldomly feel appreciated in your job. There's so many factors that would make someone feel stressed out. And when I was in my last company, I saw that it was the most misdiagnosed thing. People would come and say, oh, I was in the hospital last night. I had palpitations, and I had to have like this IV drip into my arm. I think I'm just probably sick or not feeling well. But it was actually, anxiety and stress. And that's the thing, it's the most misdiagnosed thing. People go for the physical ailments that they're experiencing, not realizing that they're actually burning out. And the problem arises when leadership is not trained to recognize when their own people are burning out, and what their responsibility is to ensure that, mental health is good for business. If your employees aren't doing well, your bottom line isn't going to do well. And so I do agree with Dr. Saliha when she was saying that it's not so much out of the goodness of their own heart. It is that they have no choice, because if they want to be, you know, making money, they need to have happy employees.
Right.
And I do think it's across the board. So all industries are paying more attention to mental health simply because they don't have a choice, not like they don't have no choice not to. It's the buzzword of the year. It's been the buzzword for a while, but 2020 it erupted. So people have to take notice now.
They do. And I think you're right. I mean, not only has mental health as a word and a concept been elevated this year, but just our shared connectedness has certainly gone up. So that sort of understanding, that desire to be connected to each other, to our neighbors, to our people, has definitely increased. And I see it at a very sort of corporate leadership level, even in our global teams, definitely a massive awareness. So I think we've, you know, there's a very mixed picture here. There's definitely some positives, there's definitely some improvements, elevated conversation, higher awareness, but clearly lots more to be done. But before we go to lots of the more negative points, because there are many in this conversation, I want to start with one other positive point, because I was really surprised at this, particularly given the cross-cultural mix in Dubai. Right, this is a MENA report. We've got people from all over the world, and all of us know that, you know, culture has a massive part in openness to this conversation. What I found amazing in this report is that less than 40% of people said they'd be reluctant to talk about it at work, which therefore means, obviously, that 60% of people said they were open or very open to talk about mental health issues at work. And in a separate question, 68%, I couldn't believe that number, 68% of people said they've already done that. They've already spoken to their colleagues this year. So I'm sure there's a million backstories. There always is, right, to quant data. But this is positive, okay? Dr. Saliha, I'm going to start with you. We are seeing more people talk about this. We are seeing, according to the data, people more open to talking to their organizations. For those people that aren't doing that, that aren't that willing to talk about these things, how do you encourage your guests, your clients, to start these conversations with their bosses, with their teams, with their leaders, particularly when they worry about their jobs and how that's reflected on them? How can we encourage more people to talk?
Well, I don't encourage people to talk unless there's a culture of that type of conversation to be had within their companies. So this is very much a top-down conversation rather than a bottom-up, because I will not ever advise anyone to talk about it if they feel unsafe to do so. And so this really is a conversation that starts with the leadership saying, we are now going to talk about this. We are now making this a priority. We are now going to open up and speak about some of these things. And if that's not the culture, then find somewhere where you can talk about it, but perhaps not within your company. Find a support group, find a safe space where you can actually speak about these things. But yeah, I would actually advise them to be cautious and be thoughtful and be considerate, because in the end, you still have to put food on the table. And that in itself is going to cause, because I'll be very honest with you that I mean, I work with a lot of professional services firms, and these guys are, you know, multinationals, and I would still say there is so much reluctance as being judged as not being competent, that I'm weak because I have these issues or I'm not able to cope. And so they might take this project away from me if I admit to them that this is too much. So they're now burning the midnight oil and burning at both ends because they don't want to be misjudged or misseen. And I personally will tell you that I've grown up in the US and I might still struggle in having some of these conversations. And so I might go to Dalia and say, hey, listen, this has been going on with me, but please don't tell the supervisor or don't tell the manager. So I guess the question I would say, who are you talking to? And is something being done is probably more important and more relevant, because there is a lot of people on the top down space that actually don't have tolerance for these types of conversations. And they're just saying, man up, toughen up. We're all going through a difficult time. This is no big deal. Like, you know, we're all stressed, cope. And so that would be my answer. Like, don't talk about it unless it's a safe place. And if it's not a safe place, find somewhere there is, because there are safe places here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, just fantastic advice there from Dr. Saliha about finding your place, finding the right place to have these conversations. And of course, organizations like Lighthouse and these types of places are offering that to you. So if you're listening today and you don't know where to go, maybe start with one of the panelists on this call, drop them a note, reach out to them, and I'm sure lots of them will have advice. Paul, tell me, what are some of the barriers? So Dr. Saliha is quite rightly saying, this is a top-down issue. We need leadership teams to buy into this. Obviously, you speak to lots of organizations. What are some of the barriers that are in the way of more leadership teams embracing this conversation?
Well, first I would support what Dr. Saliha just referenced in terms of it's very much dependent on the culture within the organization and where there is an openness, to speak and talk generally about anything, not just mental health. Or the culture that fully supports well-being of the employees, then it's a lot easier to talk openly. Every company is different, even across our client base. Companies that will have invested in EAPs, there are different levels of culture style within organizations. I think whilst it needs to come from the top down, I think the sort of middle management, line management is key. Because those are the individuals that are really interacting day to day with the majority of the employees. And I think, without doubt, yes, certainly over this period during COVID, then, one of the challenges has really to develop the skill set or enhance the skill set of the line managers in terms of their empathy skills, their emotional strength in terms of recognizing and supporting people in terms of their emotional IQ. And I think that's been the challenge. The first person as an employee I should feel comfortable about approaching is my line manager. And I think that's the key interface that we have to support. So, over the last 9 months, we've been doing a lot of training with line managers in terms of, developing their skill sets. And within the EAPs, there's the managerial coaching service that's available to line managers, again, focusing around developing, their skill set. And I think that's the key area within the organization that we have to support in terms of raising awareness. Confidentiality is always going to be key. So I would, again, confirm with what Dr. Saliha was talking about. You have to feel comfortable about opening up and talking. And so, your confidentiality will always be key part of that, and feeling comfortable that you can talk openly and freely is key, obviously.
Thank you. And I think, that's of course absolutely true. Confidentiality is really key there. And I think something I'm going to come on to next is a little bit of conversation around HR as well, and how that fits in. But before I get there, Dalia, I want to ask you about the PR industry. Obviously, we've got lots of people from PR or lateral industries on the webinar today. My take, I'm not in PR, but I've always been in advertising, so sister industries, is that we're quite good at talking. In fact, we like to talk, us communication people, right? We all talk. What's your experience of this industry? This has been your home industry. At our ability, are we good at talking? Are we good at confidentiality? Have you seen line managers that are generally pretty open that we can approach, or has it been different?
Well, I think that as communication professional, we're very extroverted and we're really good at putting up like this air of we have our together. You know what I mean? We always want to appear like we're strong for the clients, strong for our managers, strong to the media. And if you think about it, as PR professionals, we're wearing many masks. So we have who we are when we're within the agency, who we are when we're client facing, who we are when we're talking to our media, who we are when we're talking to stakeholders. And with so many masks that you lose yourself in the process. So I find that and because it's a 24/7 job, you're always client servicing, you're always monitoring the news and trying to see what's happening, and you're on crisis management, that you tend to, you're not embodied anymore. You're not aware of the thoughts going on in your head. You're not aware of the emotions that you're feeling, except when it erupts and you have no choice but to actually finally pay attention. And then it's too late. So in my experience, I haven't seen that there is this environment in our industry where people can feel like they can talk to their managers, or that the managers have the tools and the know-how to be able to respond to a conversation like that in the first place. Because if you're talking to someone, then great, just the act of talking is beautiful for getting it off your chest. If, like Dr. Saliha said, that you are safe in doing so. But if someone doesn't have the right tools, they can make it worse rather than make it better. And that's just not going to be good for anyone's mental health. So
that isn't, and you know what, I mean, I think that's so true. I think training is critical. So I want to jump on to that exact point. What we know is that according to the World Health Organization, nearly 2/3 of people with a mental disorder never seek any help from a health professional, which is just awfully sad. And what the PRCA MENA report showed us was that over 50% of staff still don't feel that they're supported at work, that they don't know who to talk about to this, and I think this is a really big problem. I've been a leader of big teams for a long time, and it can be really difficult, right, to know how to handle this. So Dani, you obviously with Safe Space are doing lots of work at sort of bringing some of that external mental health expertise in. Is this something we need to train HR and leadership in, or is this something we need to always use external companies with? I mean, it's all very well us saying to all these people on the webinar today, you must be more open, you must have more of these conversations. But how do we do that? How do we make sure organizations, to Dalia's point, are ready for that?
So I think there's a couple of aspects to it. I think every organization is different, have different kind of levels of culture where they're going to be more accepting, more psychologically safe. And I think sometimes the reason that people do reach out to external companies is potentially just to even heighten that element of safety. If an employee feels that they're going to a third party and that's not going to be reported back, or on your employee records or anything like that, that's kind of helpful. And that's something that's been reported back to us, that level of anonymity that an employee, when they're coming sort of into our safe space, has, that they're not having to be in a session that is kind of conducted by the workplace. But we found as well that I think within teams, definitely from HR, obviously not every company has HR representative either, but we all kind of have a little bit of a part to play in making companies psychologically safe. So I do think every company should be investing in this. Like Dali said, it's good for business, actually great for business, the return on investment when you are, an organization putting, spend time, resources, energy and effort into this space, you're going to see the results kind of come forward. So whether that is training internal members of staff with mental health first aid skills, whether that is looking at corporate culture and making people feel more included. We talked about conversation a second ago. That's a two-way street. So looking at improving communication skills, even from listening perspective, how we can hold space in our organizations. There's almost kind of like too much. It's quite cluttered. And, when people kind of come to us and say, there's just not enough out there for people that are struggling with their mental health, I completely disagree. I think there's almost like too much out there. If you Googled what to do X, Y, Z, you are literally going to have millions of responses back and not billions of responses. So I think it just takes organizations and like Dalia as well, all of us sort of coming together and clarifying it and make it just a bit easier for people to engage with, at a corporate level or even in the community as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there is definitely an overflow of information, and sometimes can be hard to know where to look. Nashwa, from an experience you've had with LifeWorks, with the people you've been seeing, do you think people expect that from their organization? So Dani's talking about how we train people. Is that something that people want more of in their organizations? Should we leaders all run off and qualify ourselves in this? Or do you think people are actually more comfortable with having external experts come in and support them like Dani was talking about?
Look, based on my professional and my personal experience as well, because I used to work in corporates for like 10 years. So I used to be this employee at a point in time. It's a bit hard. It definitely depends on the organization itself and the safety in there, as we all said. Yes, most of the time, this is a very sensitive thing, especially the individual weaknesses. As people always talk about, any mental health problem is supposed to be a weakness. They don't look at it in a proper way. So most of the time, even if you have like a lecture, you have like a webinar, or some open space that you can even contribute or ask questions, most of the people will ask you for, can I get your number to ask you afterwards? Because I don't want to share this info, even if something about your kids, not necessarily something about yourself. So I tend to believe that if an organization really wants to help their employees, they provide two things. The first thing is mental health 101. It's sort of a very simple training for everyone. I guess people by now will be interested to listen and hear about what are the symptoms, where to ask for help, in order not to diagnose yourself, because this is another thing that we see a lot. Either you underestimate what you are having or think it's a physical condition, or you overestimate it and you just sad a little bit, you say that I'm depressed. So this basic knowledge is needed. So it doesn't have to be a webinar talking about how to handle work stress. It must be something related to your personal problem, as an information knowledge base that I can refer back to. And the second thing is to have an access to external entities in alignment with the organization, offering discounts, offering free sessions for the employees, but it's supposed to be confidential and personal, and ensuring that the employees make sure that whatever you will say is purely confidential, because I have worked with other entities. They are expecting you to write a report after having a personal session with your the employee, and they are saying that as long as I'm paying for it, so I must have the option to ask for a report, which is totally against, most of the time, against the essence of therapy, which is I must keep everything confidential. So even if we need some insights about the case of the client with his approval for this, it must be general and very mild input for the employee to feel safe about it.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I specialize in empathy, and that is a huge empathy gap. If you think you can give your staff access to a professional and then ask them to share what you've said, I mean, that is like the biggest misunderstanding as an employer I think you could ever make. Yeah, look, Dani's got a hand on her head. I feel the same. Paul's there as well. We're all there. We're all like...
No, the one thing I would just, if I could, I would just add to that. If you are delivering these types of services into a corporate arena, corporate area, there are certain things that you have to take into account. You can still maintain confidentiality as we do through an EAP, but in certain industries, you know, you've got to be mindful of risk, corporate risk, employer liability risk, and also safety sensitive risk in terms of certain roles within certain industries. And that's where you've got to be very careful when you're delivering these services into the corporate sector. There is an element of professional assessment from the corporate perspective that you have to apply. And that's where there's a difference between delivering to an individual patient that might come into, say, the clinic, as opposed to anybody coming through you know, corporate referral type arrangement.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. Of course, if there's a risk to that person or the organization in any way, of course there's a responsibility to make sure that that is circulated. But I think, as you said, Paul, there has to be an understanding that sort of the ongoing conversations in this way have to have a certain level of confidentiality for people to be able to heal, right? If we need to talk, we need to heal, we need to know that the person we're talking to has our interests at heart, of course, and our safety and the wider organization around us. Nashwa, you mentioned there about people being aware of their mental health problems. According to the PRCA MENA report, we found that 71% of people stated they were very confident at recognizing mental health issues, both in themselves and in others. And then 63%, which is a fantastic number. So well done, all of you specialists in Dubai, because 63% of people said they knew where to go for help. So you're all doing a brilliant job of being out there and helping people, which is really a phenomenal number. Having said that, given the sharp rise in depression numbers globally, we know that the World Health Organization is saying that by 2030, which is not that long away, folks, more people will suffer with depression than any other issue. Okay, this is crazy. Last I looked, we had 335 million people with depression, so that's only going up. So Dr. Saliha, I want to just talk a little bit specifics What are some of the signs of depression that leaders or teammates on the call today can look out for, both in themselves, but also in others? How do we recognize this?
I think I would like to say that 71% seems like a really high number to me. And I would just maybe question that a little bit, because that basically means 3 out of 4 people can actually identify depression, but 2 out of 3 are not doing anything about it if we just take the numbers statistically, right? And so I would question that number a little bit, simply because I think a lot of us understand what some of these things are theoretically. Oh,
Yep.
this is what depression looks like. This way. I'm a psychologist and I've had clinical depression. I didn't know I had depression, because when you're in the thick of it and you're like, oh, wait a minute, these are all the symptoms. All of a sudden you have to zoom out a little bit, because you might actually not recognize it in yourself, because it just looks like a whole bunch of really bad days. Right? It just looks like a whole bunch of heart palpitations. It just looks like, oh gosh, I'm really stressed and I'm not sleeping properly and I'm not eating properly. Oh, I lost my appetite, but I haven't really enjoyed the things I used to enjoy. All of a sudden you put all of these things together and you have clinical depression right now. And so I think people understand some of these concepts theoretically, but I don't know if they can identify it in the person in front of them. Or they can identify it when they're actually going through it. So I would just like to say that bit, because we, the Lighthouse, train individuals in the evidence-based, mental health first aid that comes out of Australia, that is within 23 countries. So the Lighthouse trains people. It's a 10-hour course. I'm telling you, majority of those people walk in there, and these are very sophisticated people. It's not like they don't have the internet or they don't have any of these things. So they're actually like, oh, I didn't know that about depression, or wait a minute, I think I have anxiety. They weren't able to name it. And so that's one thing that I would like to say. But for clinical depression, there are several types of depression that people should be aware of. One that is actually related to an adjustment that they might be going through. So it's a new job, a new baby, a death in the family, a divorce that you might be going through. So there is an adjustment that they might be going through. Then there is clinical depression, which can actually be just neurochemically changes in your brain due to certain things that might have, biopsychosocial reasons. But the things you want to note for is the intensity, frequency, and duration of these symptoms, which are low mood most of the day, every day. And the hallmark is basically a sense of just losing joy. The things you used to enjoy, you do no longer enjoy. And, there's Robert Sapolsky out of Stanford who says depression might actually be one of the worst diseases that you can actually have. Because even if you have cancer, or even if you have, a terminal illness that you might be struggling with, you actually can experience joy. But in depression, you actually have no sense of joy. And that's why he qualifies it as one of the worst diseases that you can actually have. So those would be the 2 hallmarks. Are you low mood most of the day, every day? Or is there a sense of anhedonia, which is a sense of losing joy in the things you used to enjoy? Then there are other symptoms, and you need at least 5 of these as a cluster for at least 2 weeks, most of the day, every day. And that's changes in your appetite, changes in your sleep. So either you're sleeping too much or you're sleeping too little. You're eating too much or you're eating too little. There's low energy, fatigue, low concentration. You're just lethargic most of the day, every day. You might be crying a lot most of the day, every day, but not everybody cries. Some people aggress. So all of a sudden you're very, very aggressive most of the day, every day for 2 weeks. You can also experience thoughts of suicide. It's not that you want to actually do that, but you're just like, you know what, I'd rather just not be here. So you're starting to think like this now, like, this is just too much. I don't want this. I don't want to do this anymore. So these kinds of thoughts start to creep in, and this sense of hopelessness sets in. And so these are some of the symptoms you want to look for. Now, remember, you want to look for intensity. You want to look for frequency, how often. So if I have 3 bad days, I'm not depressed. I just had 3 bad days and I need to actually take it easy or something. But now this is extending. And one of the things that I think with the PR industry, because you guys are on the go, people sometimes think that you have to be in a really horrible job or you have to be in a really horrible relationship in order for you to actually experience depression. But you can actually experience depression even when you love what you do. But if you are not meeting your basic human needs, such as sleep and food and exercise, there's chemicals called cytochrones that actually can lodge into your brain. And those cytochrones can actually result in depressed mood. So it is a very complicated thing. And I think we should not oversimplify it. You know, even the mental health first aid course, it is 10 to 12 hours long. Like, you really have to engage with this content and live it and speak about it. And so I would just like to say some of that we might understand some of these theoretically, but when we're going through them, we might not actually know how to open up. We might not know what to say. We probably end up saying the wrong things, but just listen. You have so much to be grateful for. We can hear ourselves saying this, right? Someone comes and says, oh my God, I think I'm depressed. And you're like, but look, you have a job, you have money, like you have all the wrong things you shouldn't say to a depressed person, but we say it because we're not trained in having that conversation.
And thank you. It's just such a fascinating response. I love how you started there as well, when you were saying, you think that 70% seems high. I think it's high too. And I think, maybe this is a shadow of the awareness that Dani was talking about. Dani was talking about millions of results, billions of results on Google. Has that made us all sort of hyper aware of thinking that we know what these symptoms are? So Dani, what do you think, if someone has recognized some of these things that Dr. Saliha is talking about, some of these signs, how might you then elevate that conversation in an organization? How do you start to talk about this? How, as leaders, do we talk to our staff about recognizing maybe 1 or 2 or 3 sort of key steps that anyone listening could think, I'm going to try that this week, next week?
Yeah, well, for us, it's all the awareness and education piece. So we all have mental health. Mental health is on a spectrum, and being diagnosed with depression or any other kind of mental disorder is at one end of that spectrum. But we have the other grey area that we don't always really talk about or investigate or delve deeply enough into, as far as we're concerned. So from a safe space perspective, we're playing in that grey area. The other side is for the LifeWorks and the Lighthouses and the EAPs of this world, and that's when somebody is symptomatic and is struggling with their mental health to the point where it is impacting their day-to-day, they need to seek medical professional advice. So the area that we play in is really sort of speaking to people potentially when they're feeling more well, and we have the opportunity at that point to inspire them, sow seeds. These education pieces teach people a little bit about what depression can and can't look like, so that when that should be happening around them, to them, with people in their team, that they're potentially a little bit more able to kind of spot the signs. So for us, the education kind of comes in at that sense, but really just helping people to better identify emotions. We're very good at classifying emotions as bad or good, and what we're trying to do is more work at that level to help people to understand how to work with the emotions, the cycles of emotions that they have, rather than kind of suppressing them. Only speaking from personal advice, suppressing emotions doesn't get you very far. And again, being from agency background, crying in a client meeting was probably the moment when I realized that suppressing emotions didn't and wasn't working for me. So that's kind of something that we're really trying to help unpack at our perspective as well.
Thank you. And yes, crying in client meetings, I think we've all been there probably, so that's probably not a great sign. Nashwa, we're going to start rounding up. I want to take a couple of questions as well, but I know one of the barriers to seeking help, if your organization has helped elevate the conversation, like Dani said, and you've recognized some signs like Dr. Saliha was explaining, is getting help for mental health problems expensive? Do health insurance cover it? Is this something, if I'm today an employee in a PR agency, I've listened to this webinar, I want to come and seek out help? How can I do this? Is it expensive? Is there a cost barrier? Can you give everyone on the call just a little bit of information about that barrier? Is it easy? Can we do it ourselves?
I can see that, especially with the current situation with the online access. It is just one press on your mobile phone and you can access it easily. It's not just if you cannot afford it, you can refer to other places that can have like support groups. You can have access to other organizations or entities where you can have cheaper and a bit appropriate support. Yet, if we talk about the normal people that can afford to go to therapy, you will find many insurance companies. If I will talk about MindWorks, we have lots and lots of insurance companies, and most of our clients actually are insured. So the percentage is not as low as we think of the insurance companies. There are lots of programs of a discounted session, especially with the COVID-19. I can see many of the clinics, including ours, they were offering sort of less fees per session, or packages that you can buy, or percentage discounts to certain entities. And many entities, I guess, like ours, are open for such agreements with different companies in providing one-to-one support and overall support to the company, like webinars and actually sometimes free input in order to spread the mental health awareness, because it will end up that we will all benefit from it at the end if it is a universal thing that everyone will believe in.
Fantastic. So there's lots out there. There's lots of places we can go. There's
Yes.
lots we can access. Again, for any of the participants today, do reach out to any of these wonderful people on the line after this and speak to them. They can all give you lots more information about anything you've heard. I was going to come to you anyway, Paul, because I wanted, so please give me your thought, but I also would love you just to answer if there was one thing that you told people on the line today that you think they should, could, might access for further support after this. Let us know what your one piece of advice is, but also add your comment, please.
Okay, I just wanted to add to that I really do believe that the corporate arena, employers, are key to really changing the whole mindset about mental health. It's where we spend most of our living day, and so that it's crucial that we get employers to really engage and see mental health as a serious issue that they have to manage. Supporting mental health is not a nice to do, it's a business need, and I think companies are now recognizing that. And through through getting engagement through employers, like with an EAP, there are other types of services, but where it becomes free for the employees. That's the only way we're going to do it. It's whatever we do with the charges for an individual it is not cheap. So we have to find ways that we can access mental health. If we're in the UK and other countries, there are lots of free services. We're quite limited here in terms of having access to those free services generally. And I think through EAP type arrangements where it's fully funded by the employer, then employees and their family members have free unlimited access. And that's how we start to break that down. What was your next question? Sorry, I've forgotten.
I'll come back to it because I want to comment.
Okay.
That was
okay.
a brilliant piece of information. I was smiling hugely because in my work in empathy in organizations, I say exactly what you just said, which is that we spend 5/7 of our life at work, people on the line. We need to make a change. So anyone listening, both Paul and Dani specialize in getting organizations to take up these type of initiatives. So if you want to talk to them about getting this into your businesses, both of them great resources. And of course, Dr. Saliha and Nashwa really helping you from their sort of provider point of view as well, if you want further opinion. Before I come back to you, Paul, Dalia, I've got a question here. And anyone who's got more questions, we've got 11 minutes, so please pop them in the Q&A box and we can go through them. But we've got one question that I think is really interesting here, Dalia. This gentleman saying, we're discussing how people are talking about mental health more, yet the media talks about mental health getting worse. How can leaders help at being leaders in life and not just leaders in business? Do you have a perspective on that, Dalia?
I think that is a fantastic question. When you talk about leadership in my books, a good leader is someone who's leading by example. It's not just someone who's saying, yeah, mental health is important, but not acting like it's important. And I know it's a lot of doom and gloom out there. Yes, it's good. Mental health is on the rise and people are talking about mental health more and more, but the more we talk about it, the more people misdiagnose themselves, the more they get their symptoms wrong, and it actually becomes more messy. So it's like a blessing and a curse. But for leaderships, there's like guidelines or stuff that they can do in order to ensure that they're setting the tone or setting the stage for their companies. For example, and I've seen this happen because we used to have like wellness ambassadors. So we try to have like these people within the agency who are trying to help their fellow colleagues out. And I would see this a lot, that someone is coming and they're just like wanting to vent, and then someone tries to diagnose them. But like, you're not qualified to be diagnosing someone or telling them how to manage their own mental health, or in a lot of cases in PR, assuming that they want more work. So here, do more. This is going to take your mind off your mental health. So I would say that it's really important that leadership talks to employees about how they can support them and actually make themselves available, not just say I have an open door policy and not make themselves available. And actually check in about, like, most of the time, if your manager's checking in on you, it's to see where you are with your workload and not so much about what kind of support do you need, what kind of time would you like. So yes, walking the walk and not just talking the talk.
Exactly. So far more empathy and understanding from our leaders, people. A couple more questions coming in. Dr. Saliha, I'm going to throw this one at you. This person is saying that they have some issues at work whereby they're being overwhelmed with the pressure and the workload due to COVID-19. They need more team members, but the hiring process is being frozen. And when they're reporting this issue to their bosses, they're being told, take it or leave it, either deal with it or go somewhere else. They say they're unable to keep up with it and their mental health as a group is deteriorating. Do you have any advice? Tough question. Very tough question.
That is a tough question. And I just want to be super, super practical. I understand that I've been a single mom before, and you just have to get on with it. And you don't have the option or the luxury of, especially in today's economy, where you are, oh, well, I'll just go work somewhere else. And so the way I usually think about it is that if now I am in this battlefield, which is not a safe place, so for me, it becomes a battlefield, what do I need to do in order to just build my resiliency to cope with this environment? So if there's only 3 things you can do whenever life throws something at you, either you change the thing, you leave the thing, or you change yourself. Okay, so we can't change the thing because this leadership is not moving, obviously. You can't leave the thing because right now jobs are frozen everywhere. So the only option you have at this point is to change yourself. And this is where you put heavy investment in to skilling up and using all your will that you've got to actually build that muscle of resilience. Because just as you try to go work out and you go to the gym, and just when you think you don't have anything, guess what? You've got like a few more left. That's the muscle you want to start to build a little bit, but it's actually the mental muscle. So you got to get some really, really tight habits in place. And this is where I feel that, especially in times of crisis, I really buckle down and I don't have time to nudge around here and there. Every hour of my day is something that I'm looking at. I'm getting off of social media. I might not be socializing with the this and the that person, but only my select tribe that actually are very supportive. I would actually become obsessed about my physical health, because the physical health will actually play into my mental health. I will not compromise on my sleep. I will really lock down on my physical exercise. We know from all sorts of research that when you actually physically exercise, and of course, I know it, I hear it in your head that, oh, but I don't have energy or I don't have time. Time and energy, you need to make the time because you need to prioritize that. You don't have the energy. Energy comes after you start working out. And that's basically what you have to do. You just got to get moving. You got to get moving and just start with like 2,000 steps a day if you can't do anything else. So I really start to become quite I hone in on the physical health, because if you are in the battlefield, these are things that are going to shield you. These are things that are going to protect you. And if you don't have a strong physical body, the mental body is going to take down that physical body with it. And you will not burn out if you are really making sure that you are taking care of your physical health. All sorts of research has been done on burnout, those long working hours where you are compromising on your sleep actually play a huge role in your burnout. And there is so much sleep research. I mean, I could literally talk all day about sleep. I'm not gonna, but I'm saying if you're gonna obsess about one thing, just pick sleep and pick the fact that you're gonna exercise. And so, like I said, you only have 3 options. And the option is, you know what, the universe has thrown this in your direction. This is now time to build your muscle. Do not invalidate your experience. I'm not saying, well, okay, toughen up. I'm just saying, all right, man, this is hard. So I'm going to go to a safe place or a safe space. I'm going to go to these support groups and I'm going to talk about my emotional health, because these are people that actually make it okay for me to do that. And then I'm going to take care of my own, because in the end, no one's going to be there for you if you really fall apart. You're not going to be good to anybody, and your company isn't going to be there for you. So you actually have to really step up your game in being there for yourself and doing the bare minimum, at least the basics that are non-negotiables.
Thank you, Dr. Saliha. I mean, fantastic advice. And I really hope that everyone on the line took that really deeply. There are some very personal questions coming through to us. I'm not going to bring them up, especially given the short time we have left. But please, if you have put questions on here or sort of requesting for help and support, please do follow up with Dr. Saliha or Nashwa after this call. The reason we're on the line is to help everyone today. I can't go through all of those questions now, but please don't feel unheard. I heard you. I'm not going to announce that to a huge audience, but I really do recommend you follow up with these specialists and make sure you have those conversations. Exactly what Dr. Saliha was just saying. It's your responsibility to do that. You have lots of people behind you and lots of people that want to help. So if you do have questions, please follow up. Just before I say all the thank yous, very quickly, short answer, Nashwa, I just want to ask you one other question here. If I'm a manager and I'm already feeling depressed myself, just a couple of tips on how I can support others who are depressed when I already feel depressed. Just a couple of lines on that, because I need to wrap up. But Nashwa, any final thoughts?
Feeling connected is really important. And even if I am a depressed person, yet being on my own is something that will not help me at all. And other people, even if they are not in the same condition, yet we will find stress all over. So if we speak with other people, asking, being empathetic with them, asking about their own conditions and sharing my own struggles as well, you will be surprised that you will find other people sharing the same agony, sharing the same problems, even if not because of the same reason. So sometimes this feeling of connection between a manager or a leader with his employees, especially if the relationship is good from the beginning, there will be a mutual understanding and mutual support. And based on my personal experience as well, at times when I was down or burned out or almost burned out, and I have a very strong team that I had a very good connection with them, they will realize on their own. They will help me out. They will try to offload me, and I will be able to delegate things to them. And they will be so appreciative to the idea that I'm sharing with them, not the other way around, because I'm the authority figure in here. I'm not the weak person in the equation. So sometimes just being open with your employees will add a lot of value whenever you are at your top point or you're at bottom point. So this is what to do at that time.
Thank you. So I think everyone, there's, loud and clear from all the comments and feedback and wisdom today, there is just a real need to talk. There are people there to hear you, share. If you feel a little bit vulnerable, push yourself through that, because the conversation is really, really critical. All of the panelists here are sharing with me all of their email addresses and their social media tags. What that tells me is, as I said, they are all here and willing to talk further. So please do reach out. I'll go through everyone's names again just in a second, and continue those conversations, particularly anyone that feels that they really do need some support right now. And of course, Mimi Nicklin, you can find me. If you forget anyone else's name, find me and I will make sure that I put you in touch. So We are 1 minute to the hour. I want to say thank you so much for PRCA, MENA, for bringing us all together and encouraging this conversation, which is just so critical in this industry. The catch up of this video session will be on PRCA TV. And if you want to become a member and follow up on this conversation, you can do so by visiting their website, which is prca.mena.global, and the MindWorks MENA page is hosting the full report. So thank you again for joining us, all you wonderful panelists. We have Paul Firth, who was from ICAS MENA, Nashwa Tantawy from LifeWorks, Dr. Saliha Afridi from the Lighthouse Arabia, Dani Hakim from Safe Space, and Dalia Halabi. Thank you all so much for being here and helping me elevate this conversation, and to all of you that stayed on the line till the very end, which is most people, so that shows that this conversation was really so valid. Thank you for joining us. Do follow up with all of these wonderful experts, and I'm very proud to have hosted this conversation, so thank you all for being here.